In this I want to talk about politics. Yay, fun. Um, and sort of my experiences with it and where I am currently, my political journey, if you will. I always get very hesitant when talking about politics, especially because of my background and where I come from. And it's not because I'm not interested in politics. I am pretty deeply, I would say. Um, but it's just that the politics that I sort of subscribe to um, don't necessarily line up with what I was surrounded by or surrounded with growing up. So I grew up in Dallas, Texas, or outside of Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Wiley. This is right. It was one of the fastest growing suburbs in the country for a time. When I moved there, when I was 7, the population was about like 6 to 8,000. It was tiny. It was a tiny little town. And then by the time I graduated high school, I think it was about 50 to 60,000. And then by the time I moved to the UK when I was 24, it was like 90,000. So it has just ballooned completely. It's what's known as a bedroom community. It's basically a lot of transplants from the coastal cities or places where it's just more expensive. It was a very it certainly had an impact on me. Sort of the environment that I grew up in, that was very suburban, very conservative, I would say, very religious. Not necessarily from my nuclear family though. I would say that I had a pretty liberal upbringing, not super religious, not super conservative, but it was sort of the people I went to school with, or and this was also, I said, I moved there when I was 7. We moved there literally like within a week of 9/11 happening. So my understanding of the sort of post 9/11 world of living in the US in the 2000s, it was kind of the majority of my upbringing, and that had an impact on me in a way that really kind of terrified me. I mean, it was lots of fear mongering, lots of just praising Bush. But then I would say, like, in the day to day, like, there just wasn't much of a talk about politics. There was just sort of, it was the society. It was the society that you lived in, which is very very car centric and very suburban. In retrospect, sort of very isolating. You would go to school Monday to Friday, and then Saturday, I don't know, I was in Little League baseball, stuff like that, and then Sunday you go to church, and then do the same thing over and over again. Like, my own upbringing was also pretty middle class. I had 2 parents that worked for a living, and I wouldn't say we like struggled really deeply in any sort of way, but we certainly weren't like, super mega rich or anything. We lived in sort of a 1-story house, backyard, dogs, that sort of thing. And my sort of foray into political consciousness didn't really come until the 2008 election. I would just see all the stuff about Obama, and I just thought he was a cool guy, To me, I didn't see what was wrong with with him, but the culture that surrounded me was very not feeling that in any sort of way. And that sort of got me into looking into politics, especially sort of more left-wing politics. Not that, obviously Obama isn't left-wing, but people said that he was. And then I was like, what even is that? Like, why is that such a bad thing? Why is it such a big deal? The Young Turks have been a staple of sort of like the more liberal side of YouTube and online media and stuff. And I was watching them when I was like 15, 16, like it was like 2008, 2009. And they had a huge impact on me and my sort of, nowadays I don't fuck with them at all for for a myriad of reasons. Because I feel like nowadays I'm significantly more left of whatever it is that they are nowadays. But it was a strange thing where I was very interested in politics, and I wanted to get into politics, but none of my friends, either they were very like apolitical, they didn't want to talk about politics at all, or it was just they would just regurgitate whatever their parents heard on Fox News, and it was just like Obama's a Muslim or shit like that was just completely incoherent, that I knew were extremely right wing and would kind of just regurgitate whatever their parents would see on Fox News. That was basically, and I remember I would watch clips of like Jon Stewart and stuff on YouTube, or like the early days of Hulu and stuff, and that really sort of informed me. But I just had this deep awareness of I can't get involved in this in any way, because I can't have a good faith conversation. I didn't feel like I was safe or comfortable being in a good faith conversation with people who are just, to me, like super uninformed, and also I just genuinely disagree with on like literally every single aspect of politics and economics and just reality in general. And it was a very hard thing. I was also kind of like an in the closet atheist at that point. I don't think I would have said that I was an atheist, but especially with I was kind of coming to grips with like my own sexuality and stuff, and I also don't know if I would have identified as bi or queer or whatever, but I had this feeling of like, I had friends who were very homophobic, or not just friends, like teachers, superintendents, that sort of thing. And I just was like, it's fucked up. Like I didn't want to associate anything politics wise to in any way with them. But I also knew I couldn't express any sort of progressive politics in a way that would make me feel safe or comfortable, like expressing myself in any sort of way. So I just kind of was this middle of the road centrist. I was just like, I was very apolitical. I was like, I don't like left wing or right wing nut jobs, whatever. I just, do my own thing, which was kind of bullshit. That was a lie. But just for the sake of my own comfort, I didn't feel comfortable expressing myself on those topics. And it continued throughout university, because I went to Stephen F. Austin State, which is a very just public state school, Nacogdoches, Texas, very small, very right-wing. I mean, it's a college town, so you kind of have sort of more liberal bubbles, in the campus area. But overall, it was more or less the same, and I just kind of disengaged with politics entirely because of that. So yeah, and I didn't really engage with, I didn't openly talk about politics with anyone, really. Well, basically, once 2016 came around, it was basically like, there was the weird, there was kind of, there was Gamergate, and then there was the explosion of the anti-SJW, anti-feminist bullshit on YouTube. And you might think this is going where it's like, I went down the alt-right pipeline or something. I didn't quite go that far. But I definitely was like, because I already had that kind of centrist, apolitical mindset, there was a few of them that I watched, of those types of people in the sort of mid-2010s, which sounds weird to say. But, that I watched semi-regularly, because I kind of had that mindset of like, oh, I might not agree with them, but, they have a right to their opinion, blah, blah, blah. But there was a bit of a rabbit. I wouldn't say it's like, I never got anywhere near like alt-right stuff, because I still was super like, with the association that I had from when I was younger, I didn't fuck with anything like super right-wing, but also I would watch one of those types of channels or whatever, and they would say just outrageous stuff, about, left-wing people or feminists or whatever. And I'd be like, well, I tend to align with, sort of progressive values, but, I'm not like that. I'm not one of those people. I was in a position where the idea of expressing any sort of deeply held political belief was cringe. Like, and I feel like people who really got into the alt-right pipeline more directly, like, they were kind of super engaged with like the politics of cringe and what's not cringe. Anything related to like social justice stuff or feminist stuff, that was just cringe. And of course, like a lot of the stuff that was coming out, out of BuzzFeed and what was it, MTV and stuff, you know, that, looking back, none of that stuff was like bad in any way, or even like super duper left wing. Some of it was kind of like cringy or cheesy, sure, but like the politics of it weren't necessarily bad. It just might have been like the delivery was kind of cringe or like something, but like that's what it was. And just it upset so many men, and I say men because let's be honest, it was mostly guys who look like this, you know. Especially when 2016 came around, I found myself in a position where I couldn't really I couldn't be in the middle anymore. I felt like I had to engage with politics because, you know, with the rise of Trump and Brexit happening and all that in this country, it was a weird position for me to be in because I just, obviously being incredibly privileged as a white cis guy, I didn't, it made me deeply uncomfortable because I was just like, but I didn't, and it was because it was like, oh, I have to engage in politics, but I've never had to, and I've never had to because, like, look at me, like, I'm a white guy, like, the privilege that I had was something I just couldn't process, I couldn't understand, and that was kind of a struggle for me. You know, I was dating someone at the time that kind of was significantly more left-wing than me, and much more informed, and kind of set the record straight in certain things where, like, Zach, that's really stupid, you know, like, occasionally I'd be like, well, you know, this and that doesn't really make any sense, and I try to be pretty progressive, but it's shit that, like, nowadays I'd be like, I would be on the same side as her, I'd be like, dude, shut the fuck up. And through this sort of journey of really trying to question my own beliefs and what I actually believe, period. I think a lot of it had to do in terms of really kind of breaking out of my mold of how I felt about politics was just moving out of the US, just straight up just leaving. I got an opportunity to do a PhD in the UK, and I was like, fuck it. Things don't feel like they're getting any better in Texas where I was living. I just wanted something different. I didn't even care if it was necessarily better or worse, you know. Just I lived in Texas my whole life, and there was this just feeling of just let's do something different. I don't know. And also at that point I had a master's, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I wanted to do a PhD, and I was applying for you know, PhDs mainly in the States, but then I did one in Bristol, and I wound up working out. So, and the funding worked out and everything, so I was like, cool, let's move to Bristol, which is very left-wing city. So I got here, and, you know, it was just a completely, you know, where I come from, it was just completely night and day. There were all these, like, societies that were, you know, very pro-LGBT, and that was the crazy thing, where I could just be like, yeah, I'm bi, or yeah, I could just talk about, you know, being attracted to men, and it was just like, oh, okay. And nobody would, like, I would say I see churches and mosques and stuff, but like this the significantly less evangelical stuff that I was used to seeing all the time just wasn't there anymore, or at least not to the same extent. And it had a really profound impact on me, and I started thinking about politics in a way that was noticeably different from where I came from. The Overton window for me shifted drastically. And I really started reading, and if you live in the UK and any sort of, whether it's London or Bristol, you know, I'm sure at like bus stops you've seen like things where it's like, are you a communist? Are you a Marxist? You know, and there's all these like, there's like a million different, you know, socialist, communist, Marxist parties. I kept seeing that, you know, and I'd keep seeing stuff about the Green Party. I would meet people who would just openly say, you know, I'm a socialist. I'm like, what the fuck? You can just say that? You know, like it's a thing you can do? And it broke the mold for me in a way. And I started really engaging more when, you know, left-wing politics in a way that, you know, the world all of a sudden made a lot more sense. I started reading Marx, like any good Marxist, you know, or burgeoning Marxist. You start reading Marx, and then you're like, oh my God, everything makes sense. Which I say that, it sounds like I'm being sarcastic, but I mean, that is kind of how it is. And I just started, going to more protests. And I remember when, during the 2019 election, when I saw Corbyn speak, it was a very strange thing. For like, there was a point where I remember talking to my mom during the 2020 election. I was just like, yeah, Mom, I think I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. And I'm a Marxist. And, and she had some questions. I mean, luckily my parents, at least, were very, I mean, obviously they probably don't agree. I don't know how left-wing they are beyond what we've talked about. And to be honest, they're my parents. I don't care. Like, I still love them and they love me, and cool. I'm obviously very lucky to have a family like that, too, because I know people, have total fallings out with their family about stuff like that. But or they just don't talk about anything politics related with their family at all, which I totally understand. But yeah, that's kind of where I wound up, and I just started reading, especially during lockdown. I read a ton of stuff on politics and economics and theory, and I started, through my PhD, I obviously was reading, a fair bit of like critical theory. I was reading Adorno and the Frankfurt School and all that. The woke, evil, cultural Marxist university was indoctrinating me. Whatever. I don't know if this will be like a political channel, but it's something I feel very passionate about. People don't like being divisive, but that's just kind of how people are. People don't like being divisive. But that's politics is conflict. That's what it is. And it's very ugly on the internet because people will just shit talk each other on Twitter and, dox each other and just do all these horrible things and put each other in horrible, situations. My politics is very much, I believe in the future and potential of socialism. And is it going to ever happen in my lifetime? I don't know, probably not. But and is it too idealistic? I don't know. If I believe in anything, I believe it's the fact that, like, we could do a lot better. We could do a lot better. Distribution of wealth and resources is something that is just, to me, just the most sound goal for society. For me personally, especially as someone who's a musicologist, I'm really interested in what that means for culture and music as an industry. I called, part of this, my banner on YouTube is like living in the culture industry. And it's something I think about a lot, where we don't understand that art is heavily informed by politics, and by ideology, and by, what the original author, producer, whoever intended. Because art is a reflection of society. And it's just going to do that in some way. And even if it isn't something that the original artist intended, because we are all living, a political and historical life, we're gonna see things in it that maybe even the original artist didn't see, and we're gonna see into it those things, and that's totally. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Do I think maybe, like, to an extent, like, there's a parasocial thing that happens where, regardless of an individual's political ideology, they're going to look into a piece of media or art and they're going to go, because it doesn't align very specifically with their own ideology, then, it sucks and I hate it. This isn't me going back to being a centrist of like, both sides are bad. But it really doesn't matter whether centrist or left or right. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, that happens where people see a thing, see a piece of media, and instead of engaging it in a way that is sort of critical or intellectual, they see a thing that they slightly disagree with and they're like, ew, get the fuck out, get away. I think part of it has to do with, how isolated we all sort of are as people, but also how we've just sort of created a society in which we are just consumers and nothing else. And that can be so isolating that basically our only real friend or sort of source of social interaction is through media. So then when that media does something that we don't like, it's like, no, I don't want that. But yeah, that's what I'm interested. That's where I'm at politically. This has been a bit of a ramble. Politics is something I'm very, very passionate about, but I just don't really talk about openly with people for the sake of. I'm also not very good with interpersonal conflict, so I don't want to upset people. I don't want to rock. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to rub people the wrong way. That's just kind of how I am with my own insecurities or whatever. Yeah, it's something I want to talk about more, especially because my own research, my own writing and whatnot is heavily influenced by my own politics, my own personal politics. I've written either like film reviews or book chapters on music that I analyze and stuff. And obviously it's very I talk about class. I talk about commodification a lot too. It's something I'm passionate about. So I don't know if you're interested in that. Cool, and if not, I don't know. Sorry. It's a weird way to end this, but there you go.